A father always warned his son that if he ever goes to prison, he shouldn't expect him to write, call, or put money on his books. A day came that the young man committed a crime that was going to put him in prison for a long time. The young man stood before the judge, his heart racing with anticipation and fear. He had been warned that this day would come, that his actions would have consequences. But he had never listened, never thought that he would actually get caught. The judge's voice was firm but not unkind. You have been found guilty of the crime of which you have been accused. I hereby sentence you to 15 years in prison. The young man felt a wave of shock wash over him. 15 years. How could this be? He was only 20 years old. He would be 35 by the time he got out. As he was led away, the young man caught sight of his father in the courtroom. His father's face was stern, unyielding. The young man's thoughts were consumed by bitterness and anger as he began his sentence. The young man felt a surge of anger and resentment towards his father. Why hadn't he come to visit him? Why hadn't he supported him? He wrote letters to his father, pouring out his heart and blaming him for his situation. But his father never responded. Years went by, and the young man's anger only grew. He became hardened and cynical. He stopped writing to his father, stopped hoping that he would ever hear from him. But then one day, the young man received a letter from his father. It was brief, but its impact was profound. Dear son, the letter read, I know you're angry with me. I know you feel like I abandoned you, but I want you to know that I love you. I always have. I just couldn't support your behavior. You made choices, son. Choices that led you to where you are today. I couldn't enable that. I couldn't be a part of it. The young man felt a lump form in his throat as he read the letter. He had never thought about it that way before. He had always blamed his father, blamed everyone else. But now, for the first time, he was starting to see that maybe, just maybe, he was responsible for his own actions. The letter went on to inform the young man that his mother had passed away. The young man felt a wave of grief wash over him. He had never gotten to say goodbye. The letter ended with a simple statement. I'll be waiting for you when you get out. We'll talk then. The young man spent the rest of his sentence in a daze. He couldn't stop thinking about his father's words. He couldn't stop thinking about his own choices. Finally, the day arrived when the young man was released from prison. He was 35 years old, just like he had predicted. He was met at the gate by his friends, who had come to pick him up. The young man was nervous, anxious. He didn't know what to expect. He didn't know what his father would be like. As they drove to his father's house, the young man's mind was racing. He was angry, resentful. He wanted to confront his father, to yell at him and scream at him. But when they arrived at the house, the young man's father was calm, serene. He was sitting in his favorite armchair with a book on his lap. Hello, son, he said, looking up. Welcome home. The young man felt a surge of anger, but he pushed it down. He took a deep breath and sat down across from his father. I'm angry, he said, his voice shaking. I'm angry at you for not supporting me, for not being there for me. His father looked at him, his eyes kind but firm. I know you're angry, son, but I want you to understand something. I didn't abandon you. I didn't stop loving you. I just couldn't support your behavior. You made choices, son. Choices that led you to where you are today. The young man felt a lump form in his throat. He was starting to understand. He was starting to see that maybe, just maybe, his father had been right all along. I'm sorry, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry for blaming you, for being angry with you. His father nodded, a small smile on his face. I know you are, son, and I forgive you, but I want you to understand something else. You can't just apologize and expect everything to be okay. You have to take responsibility for your actions. You have to own up to what you did. The young man felt a surge of shame, of regret. He knew his father was right. He had been trying to deflect responsibility, to blame everyone else. But now, for the first time, he was starting to see that maybe, just maybe, he was responsible for his own actions. The conversation went on for hours, the young man and his father talking and laughing and crying together. The young man was finally starting to understand. He was finally starting to see that maybe, just maybe, his father had been right all along. As the sun began to set, the young man stood up to leave. He felt a sense of peace, of closure. He knew that he still had a long way to go, but he was ready. He was ready to take responsibility for his actions. He was ready to own up to what he had done. Thank you, Dad, he said, his voice shaking. Thank you for being honest with me, for being tough on me. His father nodded, a small smile on his face. I love you, son. I always have. And I'll always be here for you no matter what. The young man smiled back, feeling a sense of hope and renewal. He knew that he still had a long way to go, but he was ready. He was ready to start his new life, to take responsibility for his actions. He was ready to be a man. The next morning he cut off every friend he had because after 15 years they should have been somewhere else in life. They are still in the streets with no jobs doing the same thing. And when this young man started holding himself accountable for all the decisions, he became a mentor for young men and women to put them on the right track. And all the dudes he used to kick back in the days said, man, you acting funny, you don't kick with us no more. Why is that? He responded. I lost 15 years of my life, and when I got out I chose to be somebody. You weren't even locked up and you wasted 15 years of your life. And you are all still a nobody. The choices that you make in life get you in certain places in life. So whether good or bad, the choices you make are because of your free will, and the person that always holds themselves accountable is the person that will always grow.